Ciao, amigos. CK scores. Kuppa plays. Doggo. Sizz.
Starting in April, and a large portion of the server turns into parts of CK's house. We're off to a great start. Basically, multiple users change their usernames to be things like doors, drawers, ceilings, floors, floor tiles, tables, walls, windows, normal things. Rulers, kitchen appliances, pesticides, ranges? Not sure about that one. Molecules, voltages, I guess. And of course, homemade chicken soup. Yep, okay. Come the 29th, and CK threatens to not end the tricky trivia event in order to prevent 10 words of wisdom from beginning. Will would clarify that the event starts on Sunday, not necessarily as soon as tricky trivia ends, as he previously said. But this wouldn't stop CK from keeping tricky trivia in the air until the 5th of May. The winner was declared as
myself with 1,710 points. Will made a close second over Stubbs third, trailing by only 1¼ points. There were also additional honours given to winner _1421, Sky King, and yours truly for having the highest average points per round. On the 22nd of May, the Ayuk Nemtenes channel was established, allowing the staff to separate big, important announcements from, well, this. This channel would later be described as basically a free trial of the shenanigans that take place in staff boardroom.
The 26th sees the last official communication regarding 10 words of wisdom. The game technically never finished, and has been on an indefinite de facto suspension since. On the 29th, CK announces the debate battle. Similar to actual debating, participants are split into teams of 3 and pitted against each other with debating topics, though this takes more of a comedic approach of aligning itself with Ace Attorney rather than, say, the Australian Debating Federation.
On the 17th of June, Discord added a new feature, automodding. One of these features was to alert staff members of any naughty words that users might have said, but this list could be made public, so CK decided to repurpose this as a list of shame, adding anyone's messages that included any words related to the 2018 hit game Among Us, featuring words like sus, Among Us, sussy, baka, among others.
Jumping forward to the end of June, Drummond announces some changes to Music of the Week, or rather a rebranding of the monthly model. This sees scores 60 days old or newer eligible for voting once a month. Voting was also moved to take place in a Google form, rather than on Discord or the MuseScore website.
The 20th of July sees probably the highlight event of the year announced, the broken telephone. It's a bit complicated, so let's explain. Each person was given 4 bars to write something in, which would then be passed on to the next person to continue the song. However, the next person after that only received the directly previous person's work. This led to some certainly interesting results, of which you may find in the description of the video.
Soon after, on the 25th, the debate battle is officially cancelled. CK cites a lack of engagement and participation with the event, but I think it's because everyone was just afraid to counter my excellent arguments. Apparently nothing significant happened in August, which brings us to September with, that. For newer members unaware, they may not know who W for Will is. He joined the server on March 5th, 2021, and would be accepted into the staff team alongside Kuppa on October 5th, 2021. He served as a moderator and participated in projects such as the JRPG project, the Super Mario Galaxy unofficial soundtrack, and was the leading supervisor of Luigi's Mansion 4 unofficial soundtrack project. Out of privacy, I won't go into the details about the grounds in which he left, but wherever he is, we hope he's doing better.
Here's an event of lesser significance. The Callbot reminders to post the question of the day in the modbotting channel were finally put to rest. This screenshot here is from about a month later when Plant honoured this fact in Auk Nemtenes. Love how I can just pronounce that.
On the 24th of September, the premiere of the completed Broken Telephone event happened in the Music Voice channel. Except it didn't. Zhao slept through the first two alarms, pushing it back to the 25th. I swear I had a screen recording of this live premiere, but the most significant thing from that day I found in my camera roll was this meme, so I don't know, I guess you can have it. Oh, what's this? Sizz to the rescue with some screenshots of the premiere. Awesome, thank you very much for that. This isn't the only time she comes to the rescue, stay tuned for that.
Soon after, on the 27th, the second Broken Telephone event was announced, with the key difference of having 8 bars instead of 4. This was followed by October 7th's announcement of the Exploding Pumpkin event for Halloween. Similar to the Exploding Potato event of previous, there's a set order of participants, and players must ping the next person in the list to pass the pumpkin along. 10 days later, another announcement, the sequel to the live recording project, the first step of which, as usual, is to pick the song to play.
Come October 18th, and a bit of controversy comes to fruition. CK and Zhao admit to intentionally and secretly extending the Exploding Pumpkin event as to, quote, absolutely mentally scar the participants, unquote. Of course, CK citing Sun Tzu as his inspiration, in typical meme fashion. But I want to talk about this part specifically. Quote, nah, just never end it. That way Doggo can never be mod, unquote. Why exactly would ending Exploding Pumpkin result in Doggo becoming a moderator?
Well, jumping back to August, and CK jokingly gives Doggo permission to access Staff Boardroom, resulting in him just lurking in the channel for a month or so, and eventually engaging in an unofficial sub-moderator position. With mod applications scheduled to open after Exploding Pumpkin finishes, it's not hard to see the reasoning here.
It'd be only on October 20th when the event finished. Doggo was crowned the victor after Mint Oreos was blasted to pieces, and BowMastur before him. The aforementioned moderator applications opened the same day.
They would close shortly after on October 24th, with Doggo the only applicant securing a position. To someone in the know about the aforementioned, this is not a surprise, though it is easy to see how this could be seen as a shady, behind the closed doors secret prize. Moving on, and on the 31st, a poll is held for the band members to determine whether Northeast Frost Street or Toad's Factory should be our next song after Gusty Garden Galaxy. For some reason, everyone but Akai and I chose the wrong option. Regardless, on November 8th, Zhao officially declared we were doing Northeast Frost Street. December comes around, and artificial intelligence is really starting to pick up on a global attention scale with the release of ChatGPT, based on OpenAI's GPT-3 system, about 2 years old at this point. Plant, of course, in infinite wisdom, saw this as the perfect opportunity to justify a true, scientifically accurate reasoning for why the server should be shut down because of CK's tyranny. You can pause to read it if you want.
However, ChatGPT would later be caught contradicting itself through conflicting recounts of the lore of 7 Grandad in the server, particularly as to whether Plant was an evil moderator or a wise and noble creature. No? You want a more accurate lore? Well, back in October 2020, we see the first ever reference to 7 Grandad by a now deleted user. Some speculate it to be German's old account, though it's most probably Plant's. Jumping forward to September 2021 though, is the first, more relevant reference for our server, with Plant following the number 7 in the counting channel with the phrase Grandad. However, it's not until February, which somehow didn't make it into last year's video, where we see the enforcement of the rule we have all come to know. Some, unfortunately, the hard way. More on this later.
Also during December, Doggo suggested that Chat General should be removed from the server. Why? Because putting someone in a tournament where they have to spam another person for many days with no end may break. This also led to multiple other chats getting claimed by the staff team for their own use. This lasted for a few days before the server was returned to normal. We even gained 3 members during this time and lost no one.
Not too long after that, the community ambassador role, originally ambassador of the community, was also created and given to some upstanding members of the community: Stup, Doggo, Kuppa, and Plant. The reason for this new role is because we sorta had to retire the moderator role. This is because, for those who didn't know, the moderator role is something you can technically earn through the leveling system. It's just stupidly and unreasonably far beyond gold rank. Or at least it used to be. Having a look at the Tatsu dashboard, it seems to no longer be the case. Regardless of now though, it definitely was a ranked role at the time, and Tatsu doesn't act very happily when users illegitimately have higher ranked roles. So the practical functionality of the moderator role was sort of split between the existing staff team role and the new community ambassador role.
This brings us to January, with the declaration of the 4th Hunger Games event. Yes, the 4th. This overused event never seems to become outdated. Doggo, who's now been a moderator for about 2.5 months, decrees the 4th Hunger Games event to require a total of 48 tributes, consisting of volunteers and sacrificing members from the top 48 ranked on the server, to fill in the gaps to reach the target number. The games were to start in about a week. The conclusion of the 4th Hunger Games event sees Evan B. of District 10 declared the winner after having set District 4's super epicness on fire. The Anaconda of District 2 died of starvation shortly earlier. However, he didn't get additional honors for the most kills, sitting at 5. German came in at 4, with Lydia and Polly the King tying in for 3rd at 3 kills.
On January 22nd, the Emoji Submissions channel launched. This was because of collaboration between the community ambassadors, members of the server, and members of the staff team. Known as the Great Emoji Purge, several of the server's older, unused custom emoji were removed in favour of new ones relevant to the modern interests of our members.
In much better news, out of that same day, years of research by the University of Western Australia's top scientist confirms indeed that the Xiaomei gross is truthfully and irrefutably real. This conclusion would have large rippling effects across the relevant socioeconomic and political communities it affected.
On February 7th, I'd announced a proposal for a new quiz event, a video game musicians-based quiz on Kahoots created by minutes ago. This announcement was so popular that we managed to get both myself and CK to play this outstanding game, where I just barely came out on top.
February 27th sees a rapid development in the counting channel, with Kuppa and Sizz Tuna almost entirely by themselves, jumping the count from the late 200s to the early 900s in the span of just about an hour. I don't quite remember who messed it up, but as you'll understand in a moment, the server logbook is a bit cluttered from that day. The first thing you may notice is this significant time difference here, which seems a bit suspicious. However, you'll also notice this similar message here, that is also a significant time apart. A devious act of cheating, or a kind generosity? It's unclear. However, it would soon fall to bits when Stup and I both counted 910 accidentally. Officially, Stup was declared the one to now hold the counting record. Plant was quickly thrown into an anger, depression and grief, whereas his accomplice took pride and joy in the work. Perhaps sarcastically, however.
As the sun rose across the lands, and the people of the server learnt of the news of the new record, CK was soon to query as to whether this accomplishment was in part to a freedom from the 7 Grandad rule. Plant denied this fact, though it wouldn't take long for this idea to come to fruition. The 20th of February, 1st and 2nd of March saw people still observing the long-standing policy, but from the 3rd onwards, there was a seemingly unspoken consensus that the curse had been lifted. We also see here the next record of 930, set by myself on March 4th.
That is jumping ahead a bit though. Back to the 28th of February for a moment, and we see the announcement of the Guess the Song event. In the event, competitors are given a sample of multiple songs, often ordered by difficulty, and which points are awarded for identifying both the song and the game it comes from out of short segments. At the end of each round, those who do not submit an answer or the person with the lowest score is eliminated.
March 11th brings about some more updates to MuseScore of the Month. This time around, the key change is moving from first past the post voting to preferential voting, or normal people speak, voting for just a single entry to voting for the most liked entries. And if that explanation isn't confusing enough, just know that you now vote for multiple scores. The reason for this was given by German at the time as being to eliminate the prevalence of tiebreakers, though there are plenty of practical applications in the real world of preferential voting being more effective at gauging the true popular opinion of the people.
Looney, Tuna, Ian. He seemed innocent enough, a simple man asking for composers for a project he was working on. However, he was not familiar with our server policies on advertising. Users were required to partake in conversation and could not access the advertising channel until reaching a certain level based on the number of messages the user sent. This is when all hell broke loose. And just like that, he was gone. Nope, he came back like 2 weeks later to the server. This time, he came prepared. However, absolutely no one took him seriously, which is totally fair if you're a guy who does Looney Tunes for a living. So here's some stuff. I'm not going to bother with another Hall of the Mountain King sequence because that is time and budget I do not have. Anyway, he left and then he came back again and left and did it again because he is, yes. Anyway, moving on.
On March 18th, the announcement was made that the resources channel will be moving to a Google form instead of the previous method of pinning messages in Discord. However, the older resources are still maintained, so it's more of an additional and easier way of viewing the compiled resources rather than a full replacement.
You may have noticed earlier that Stup claimed the server would never reach 1,000 in the counting channel. Well, that's exactly what we have here on March 19th. Again, myself and Sizz achieved this feat. Not by ourselves, of course, but as usual, we made up a significant driving force of counts. However, it actually wouldn't be until March 21st that the count would actually come to an end. Evan B counted 1,302 as the server's new high score, which, as of writing, still stands. Plant would admit the day prior that the 7 Grandad rule had been liberated from, but he wasn't going to let us off so nicely, especially given that this was the second successful high count in such a short space of time.
As such, after a rather misleading poll that many people seem to have just ignored, a new, more harsh 7 Grandad rule was introduced. To simplify, the previous rule only required Grandad if the last digit of a number was a 7. This new rule requires a Grandad when there is a 7 in any digit place of the number in question. There's also strictly no workarounds by using the mathematical features of the counting bot instead.
Interestingly enough, in a bit of a random tidbit of server history, the 27th of March sees us collectively decide that BowMastur, or Breadmaster, supposedly, is a simp. It's hard to follow exactly how the conversation played out, but it has its origins with Neon Knight's custom status on the day. After that issue was resolved, she, and yes, I did double check that, goes on to complain about our grammar. Nah, I reckon if Tom Scott says it's okay, then we're fine.
On the 2nd of April, show uploaded. 2nd of April, show. On the 2nd of April, show uploaded the second Broken Telephone event song entitled The Broken Telephone Trace. They also at this time announced that the 4th, 5th, and 11th Broken Telephone events will be coming soon.
So, yeah, that was obviously April Fool's. But this next development is a bit interesting. Firstly, we did get confirmation that Plant is capable of walking, which implies he has legs in that pot. More importantly though, Plant seems to have accidentally left administration of the server unattended. Out of the darkness of what can only be assumed to be the alleyway next to Plant's house, appeared the famous troublemaker Spampton G. Spampton, who was quick to take advantage of the situation and gain administrative access to Plant's account, locking the server down and forcing a special event to determine its fate. Very similar to Guess the Song, though focusing specifically on high-quality video game rips. You know, those high-quality rips.
Declared victor in this event was Sizz Tuna, scoring 500 points. Her reward was 5,000 chroma, but was faced with the decision of restoring the server to its former glory or gaining access to Ayuk Nemtinase. She decided to not let the server sit in purgatory, thus spending her chroma wisely. Shortly after, on the 7th of April, after Spampton had been well and truly flushed from Plant's lair, Sizz would also be declared the victor of the Guess the Song event, narrowly beating Plant after CK definitely didn't keep changing the rules of how the final round would play out.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Here's to another year of this chaos. Like, subscribe? I don't know, don't ask me, I'm still not the social media manager.
An event of less significance, the Colbot reminders to post the question of the day. It's so phrased so weirdly.
On March 18th, the announcement was made that the resources channel will be moving to a Google form instead of the previous method of penning messages in Discord. However, I can't take that long of a pause. I'm like out of breath. Okay.
CK scores! Woo! Yeah! Let's add this one to the video. Yeah! Don't add that one to the video.
On the 2nd of April, show uploaded the second Broken Telephone event song, entitled The Broken Telephone Trace. Telepjone.
Plant! So horrible. That was so horrible. I can't do this.
Play!